Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Living Mythology, I am proud to bring you scholars from the edge of time. And they will take us to an alternate dimension where we'll meet and enjoy the exploits of the Barbarians. Greetings, Nick. Greetings, Michele. How are you?
Greetings, Hercules. Doing very well.
I'm happy to hear that.
Hello, sir. Sorry, we just had a cat flop over and want a belly rub. Oh, we're doing really good. It's good to see you. It's been a month, although this feels like a long month since we've last hung out.
It does. It feels like it's been longer than a month.
So any cool adventures on your end, sir?
I'm involved with the local election process. I interviewed the candidates for the Board of Education. I interviewed the people running for the council. And I might be able to interview one or two more people, before the end of the early election. So I'm still aiming for that. And I work the polls. So I'll be working 4 days of early polling and then election day itself. And Athena will join me on working election day. And I'm creating a resource group so that people can vote more effectively.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, we just turned in our ballots and it was tough. I mean, because we're in Arizona now, first time voting in Arizona, and you had your typical, here's your Senate person, here's your, legislative person, but it was like 3 pages of judges. Do you want to retain this judge? Yes or no? Do you want to retain this judge? Yes or no? I'm like, I don't know who these folks are. So going to Google and trying to research, these aren't folks that make the news or anything. You don't see signs from them. They don't have, they're judges. And so it's like, whew, we had to do deep dives on every single person.
Yeah, one of the tools that we were looking at was, I think it was
Ballotpedia.
Yes, Ballotpedia.
Yeah, which we found somewhat helpful as long as the candidate actually filled out the survey, which was then helpful. But the judges was surprisingly difficult, and like Nick was saying, we had probably about 50 that we had to look up and see what they were about, try to figure out, and it's not like there's a lot of documentation just in a general Google search. So it was a bit more challenging. Hopefully that'll change in the future. So
make
thank you for doing what you do to make voting easier.
And would that all voters did what you do and actually research their choices, because it's very important to know how someone votes and what type of actions they take on behalf of the people that they're serving. So thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome.
Well, we've had some stuff on our end. It's been a little hectic over here with stuff going on, but we've been working on our projects and whatnot. I think the coolest thing I've had happen was it was a really quick flash in the pan essay opportunity that came up. I think we've talked before about the movie Kaltiki. I probably mentioned it in passing. Somehow or another, this movie keeps popping up with me, even though I don't think it's the greatest film out there. But there's a zine that's starting that's going to be focused on found footage films. And I pitched to them, hey, do you want a short essay on Kaltiki? And they said, yeah. And, inspiration struck. I think I had an essay cranked out just in a couple days and it was accepted. So sometime November, December, this found footage zine will come out and I'll have an essay in it.
Fantastic.
The only bad thing is I worked on that when I still have the pile of projects behind me looming.
I know what you mean. I have 2 things I've been working on. One for a book that'll be coming out next year, and that'll be my first larger press contribution. And then I have a small press contribution that's due, I think, in another week. So I still have a few days to polish it up and complete it.
He's doing the old high school college gal. I'll do it the night before. That's okay. I still do that.
Yes, procrastination is my middle name.
But sometimes that's a great thing to do. Sometimes something unexpected comes out when you're under that much pressure.
I feel like when I'm kind of working on something last minute, all the other garbage, all the noise just kind of dissipates and I'm able to just basically focus because I am kind of under the gun and I actually work better that way. At least
So you need to
that
light the fire under you every time.
something like that. I guess for me, I was on a recent episode of Galactic Terrors. And I read a portion of my essay that's going to be in a book next year about, it's called A Vindication of Monsters. And it's a focus on all things Mary Shelley and Frankenstein.
Oh, wow.
Story. So my essay was about Bernie Wrightson, who did the illustrations for the novel. And he did that kind of in mid 70s into the early 80s. It took him about 8 years to draw 50 illustrations, but it was the best way that he knew how to convey what he wanted to about that novel, because he'd been obsessed about it since the time he was probably like, you know, a young boy. So it's probably one of his most seminal art series out there that he's known for. So I got to talk about that. It was the first time that Galactic Terrors had a nonfiction writer on. So I was very honored to represent nonfiction and academics and in the program, and it is available on YouTube. It's up for, you know, viewing pleasure from now till whenever.
Please feel free to share a link.
I will.
Next up, this isn't nothing I'm a part of, but I'll be doing a book review or maybe an interview on it. But since we're talking sword and sorcery tonight with the Barbarians, there's a brand new magazine that just started called New Edge, Sword and Sorcery magazine. Nice and hardback. So it's just a collection of essays and new sword and sorcery stories. And so I'll be giving that a go, you know, probably writing something up next month about it, but it looks really cool.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what they're about and what they're trying to do?
Sure. I mean, I'm not like affiliated with them or anything, but they're just trying to do more inclusive sword and sorcery stories, you know, making it you know, accessible to everyone, you know, all folks to take enjoyment and not, you know, just old white dudes. But no, it seems like a very noble project. The artist for it, he's a local artist down here. I bought one of his paintings when we were at that conference in September. His name's Gilead. So yeah, this, you know, a lot of not just sword and sandal, but sword and sorcery stuff passing through our clutches.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And I'm working on actually several essays. I've got one that's going to be due in March about kitties and the Egyptian mythology, and using the 1999 The Mummy, the one with Brendan Fraser, as kind of the jumping off point.
Best mummy movie.
To talk about the presence of the cat and the mythology around the cat in that particular film. It's called Cat's Companion, I think.
Yeah.
I think it'll go to the publisher mid next year. I'm not sure when it'll be out, but I'm in that. Nick will be in that.
I gotta start that essay, but we're still waiting for a style guide.
Yeah, so be starting that pretty soon. You were in a book that just came out.
Was I?
Yeah. Twilight Zone?
Oh no, that's like the biggest news, and I totally forgot all about
I was like
it.
looking for the book.
Shoof. Okay, all right. There it is right there. I brought this up before. Oh yeah, it finally came out from our publisher McFarlane. The mini lives of the Twilight Zone, essays on the television and film franchise. This was an essay I completed back in early 2020, right before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And so it's a bunch of essays on Twilight Zone, Rod Serling, and not, you know, all iterations of the Twilight Zone. So original series, the movie in the 80s, the late 90s, and then the Jordan Peele version that just came out. So I have an essay in there because I'm weird like this, not about the Twilight Zone at all. I have my essay about Encounter with the Unknown,
Aha.
which was an early 70s anthology horror movie that Rod Serling narrated. And I first heard of that movie when I read Stephen Thrower's book, Nightmare USA, and it's listed in the back of it. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's looks like a terrible film. And by all means, it is a terrible film. But, you know, whenever you write laser focused on something, you could still say, that's a terrible film, but I appreciate it more and enjoy it. But yeah, it's, I was talking about in that film, how it leverages Rod Serling's narration. And it's the only movie I've ever seen that has two sets of narrators. It's like, oh man, we forgot to book Rod Serling for another day, so we're gonna bring someone else in. So it's got like two sets of narrators. So like the stories are very Twilight Zone-ish, you know, having Rod Serling narrate it makes it feel like this is like a Twilight Zone movie. As you could see, the graphics on the VHS tape have Twilight Zone imagery. I mean, that font is Twilight Zone font. I mean, there's the unlock this door with the key of your imagination, and there's a door and a key, and there's a Rod Serling in the center. So, you know, I was talking about how, you know, it uses all these elements to basically become a term called multiplicity, which is, you know, you have a text, and then my nose is itching really bad. You have a text, but you know, there's the text is an open book, so it's you know, open for sequels and prequels and remakes and reimagines and stuff like that. So I say Encounter with the Unknown is a multiplicity. It's in the same canon as Twilight Zone, despite it being a very low budget horror anthology film. But I guess it's got a little bit of a charm to it. But yeah,
I thought the stories in the film were actually kind of interesting, and they're definitely in keeping with the Twilight Zone theme.
So that just came out this month, just in time for Halloween. So I haven't had a chance to read it yet. There's, I mean, a lot of it. I'm the only one who do not overtly write about Twilight Zone. That's me. I like going the esoteric route. So yeah, that was my big publishing news. So now I'm just waiting for the Gladiator book to come out, which someday, I mean, maybe early next year now.
When it comes out, we'll definitely do a few specials on it, you know, just to focus on it. You invite some of the other authors that were part of it, and let's celebrate that book being released.
Ooh, I'll have to reach out to the editor on that one, because that's not a book I've took charge of. I'm only a contributor to it, but you know, this was, it sounds like an epic book. I don't know all the other chapters in it, but I mean, come on, it's an entire book devoted to Gladiator, so it's going to be epically neo-peplumly awesome.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately it was supposed to come out a couple of years ago in honor of Gladiator's 20th anniversary, and unfortunately with the pandemic and things, it did end up getting delayed for a number of different reasons. So
I cranked that essay out at the exact same time I cranked this one out. I was like, oh man, I'm under the gun, under pressure to get all this stuff out, and I did, and now it's been hurry up and wait, but the wait has been worth it. It's nice to have another book out there.
Awesome.
So, Barbarians?
yeah, let's talk about Barbarians.
So, Barbarians.
Do you want to set up why it was selected?
Because it's Barbarians and it's short. It's 88 minutes, and we're like, man, we need a short, fun film that's sword and sandals, sword and sorcery. And we have not seen this movie yet. Well, now we have, but beforehand. So this movie just got a nice, I mean, it's been on VHS for 30 years, you know, out of print, hard to get. So Kino just did a nice release of it, plucked that up for the collection, and now we've had a chance to visit it. I am not very familiar with the Barbarian brothers, but seeing pictures of them, they epitomize everything that is 80s with their parachute pants and mullets. And I say that with affection because I had fun with this movie. So, Michele, you got a plot synopsis for us?
I do. I do. All right, get settled, because here we go. So cue upbeat electronic music and opening credits that are juxtaposed against the backdrop of the aftermath of a battlefield. As the disembodied voiced narrator commences to set up the story that us, the audience, are about to watch. The image of the battlefield is replaced with a sweeping view of a beautifully expansive valley and majestic mountains and a group of people riding in several large, blocky wagons. They are wearing colorful clothing, practicing their trades. They are traveling performers. They are a peaceful people known as the Ragnar's. Very soon, though, they are attacked by Kadar and his band of men dressed in black and silver armor. While the Ragnar's are able to evade the men and continue traveling down the open road, they eventually come upon several of Kadar's men blocking the road. Kadar wants a ruby that Canary wears in her belly button so he can increase his power. Little does he know that Canary had already given the ruby to one of her trusted men who jumped off the wagon prior to being stopped. The courageous Canary, a young blonde queen of the Ragnots, jumps down from the lead wagon and faces the evil Kadar. She is captured, and as Kadar toys and then kills a couple of her people, two young twin boys attack and bite off two of Kadar's fingers. He is about to kill the boys when Canary says she will submit to Kadar and do anything as long as the boys are not harmed. Kadar promises that he and his men will not harm the boys as long as he is alive. Most of the Ragnits are captured, but some are not and get away. Canary is added to Kadar's harem and kept in a cage, like how Canary and Cage are together.
Mhm.
The twins, Kuchek and Gore, are sent to the pit, managed by the Dirt Master. The twins are separated and for many years are subjected to abuse by helmeted guards as they grow up into very beefy, strong men. Canary has been showered with gifts over the years, but Kadar is still without the ruby that his sorceress covets for herself. Finally, the day has come. The twins are fitted with helmets and are set to fight to the death until they knock each other's helmets off, revealing their faces to each other. They quit fighting, and after destroying the makeshift arena, they make their escape. They run into the Ragnots, who evaded Kadar years ago, but they don't recognize the twins. They are beefy now, of course. So instead of welcoming them back, they are to be hung with a pesky thief named Ismi. Eventually, the strong men are able to substantiate their past association with the group, and they want to go back and rescue Canary, but apparently they need weapons. Ismay states that she can assist with that quest, so they are all released to go secure weapons from the local rowdy pub. Bucket of blood. The arms dealer Jacko challenged one of the twins to arm wrestle, which sounds kind of nuts. But we soon learned that Jacko is a rather big man himself. Oh, he has a snake, which he strategically places on the table to evoke fear in the twin. It doesn't work though, and Jacko loses, and he's pretty sore as well. No weapons, but Ismay has discovered a back way into the harem, so the boys can rescue Canary. The twins easily meet up with Canary, but instead of leaving her cage, she tells the boys where to find the ruby, as well as the side quest they need to complete to secure the necessary legendary armor and weaponry to fight the dragon, protecting the ruby. Kadar's sorceress learns that the boys came for a visit, so she tortures Canary for the whereabouts of the ruby. She's waited several years and she's not waiting any longer. She takes off for the ruby, which she has coveted. However, Canary is left out the vital information about the special armor and the weapons that would be needed. Now, the sorceress probably could have used that armor, and weaponry, but she doesn't have it. Meanwhile, the boys and Ismay go get the weapons and armor. Kadar returns to find his precious canary prostrate from her torture, and that really pisses him off. The sorceress finds and takes possession of the ruby, but then is killed in the process. The boys and Ismay arrive to discover the ruby gone. They have a long dialogue about that. Like, where's the ruby? Well, I don't know where it is. Why don't you know where it is? But anyway, the dragon is still around, though, and waiting for a second meal. So Ismay has a plan, and the boys execute it brilliantly, leaving us all wondering why they needed the armor and weapons to begin with. But, whoa, they find the ruby inside the dragon along with the dead sorceress. So, who cares about the weapons and the armor? The boys give Ismay the ruby to take back to the Ragniks. Well, they go back to rescue Canary from the harem, but they don't know that she and Kadar left to chase after the sorceress. Canary calls upon the magic of the ruby and confuses Kadar's vision and mental state so that he ends up stabbing Canary in the heart. She dies in his arms, but she is free. Kadar runs into the boys and a tense climatic battle ensues. Kadar inflicts stab wounds into each twin. Then when he's going to deliver the mortal blow, he doesn't have the necessary fingers to shoot off the arrows. Both boys throw their swords at Kadar, making him a bit of a sword cushion. With Canary's death, the ruby turns to stone, but then suddenly it shines brightly again, signifying the Ragniks can select a new queen. They round up the virgins and align bare belly buttons, but the ruby refuses them all until Ismay is brought forcibly to the priest for her turn. She is none too happy and even states she isn't a virgin. But the ruby found its new home with Ismay, who turns out to be Kara, a missing member of the Ragniks. Returning to the beautiful valley and the majestic mountains, the Ragniks are complete again and resume their peaceful travel in entertaining ways. They're in the plot.
That was
Whoa.
comprehensive.
That was fun.
So this movie is considered one of the worst movies made. It makes a lot of top worst movies ever. And I'm here to say it is not merited because this movie was actually awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. This was from the 1980s sword and sorcery films that we've been revisiting the last couple months, both here and other podcasts at my website. This is up there. I mean, I still think Beastmaster's the best, followed by Conan, but this is up there with them. It's way above the Deathstalkers, way above the others. We had a lot of fun watching it. I didn't know what to expect going in. I knew it was going to be Italian because it's directed by Ruggero Deodato, but he did Cannibal Holocaust, and that is a very gruesome movie, and he's done his fair share of other gruesome movies. And we were actually kind of surprised at how this was very 1980s cartoony, very He-Man-ish and Thundar the Barbarian-ish with the the cartoon factor kind of amped up a bit, and it was fun. It was pretty bloodless, pretty goryless, very lighthearted, especially for an 80s genre Italian movie.
It really struck me as though he probably had a lot of fun with the film, and that this was probably one of those cases where everybody just was on board. They were having a lot of fun. Yeah, we hope, but had a lot of fun with it. I did check the budget to make the film was $4 million. So just to give context, The Beastmaster was a $9 million film. Conan the Barbarian was $20 million. I wasn't able to find Ator or the Hunter from the Future. I couldn't find what their budgets were as a comparison. But Deathstalker 2 was 400,000. So we get kind of an idea there. And then just for a little bit additional context, even though we haven't really talked about it much, Red Sonja from 1985 had a $17.9 million budget. The receipts for this film does say a lot. It was only $800,000 apparently, and that's a global receipts. But maybe people have bought the
VHS and cable would probably definitely have kept this film up and going.
Yeah.
So I think we got quite a bit to talk about the film. I guess the first thing to bring up is its lighthearted comediness, because we recently watched Deathstalker 2, and I remember not being that impressed with Deathstalker 2 at all. I thought it was veering off into like bad parody and very self-aware, but not in a good way. And I think that the 35-hour-long wrestling scene in the middle of the movie was just a slog fest. And so it just wasn't funny. It was more of an annoying film. But then we watched Barbarians, and it's way more. I mean, I don't think it's an overt comedy like in an airplane movie or whatever, but it's funny. There's the brothers joke with each other. They make fun of each other. There's a little bit of slapstick going on in the film. There's a scene when they get the weapons, like this wolf creature jumps out and they like behead it in one swoosh. So it was like there's all this buildup of here's a monster, here's a monster, here's a monster, and it jumps out dead. And then they play with its head. I mean, it's very childlike, and it makes sense. I mean, they're both kids that are forced into the pit. And, they're basically tortured and whatnot, but, they never really had a chance to, I guess, gain maturity. Even though their bodies are huge and beefy, they probably still have very childlike, mind and memories. And so I think that adds a little bit, I'd say, an innocence to this movie that you don't normally see in other sword and sorcery films.
And I think that if it had been another film where there was like a lot of blood and gore, I think that their kind of relationship with each other and the humor from their involvement, their acting in the film, I think would not have set well as it does with this film. And I think that's part of what, people don't get past the fact that, they're not the best actors out there. But, it works for the film. And I think a lot of people,
they're barbarians. You don't have to be Shakespeare for this.
Yeah, you don't need to be Shakespeare, and you can have fun. And I think that it works. They're kind of silly. They're kind of simple, but it actually works in this film.
I think the fact that it's twin barbarians makes it way different than any other sword and sorcery and sword and sandal film out there, because usually those films have a singular protagonist. I mean, classic sword and sandal is, a Hercules operates by himself, a Samson operates by himself, and Ursa, so on and so forth. The whole point of those films is they're strong men. Everything they need to be successful is in themselves. They get captured, break the bars, lift the chains, whatever. At the very end, they take on the army of the evil king or whatever, single-handedly, and come out victorious. But it's always, a singular protagonist, maybe a couple sidekicks, but not usually. That's more of a 80s onward type thing. And also in normal action films. And you might throw in a love interest as well. But this movie eschews all that by having two protagonists, and they're given equal weight. This isn't like, because there's other movies that, like a buddy cop type film where they're kind of given even weight, but maybe one is captured and the other one's got to save them. There's usually one that edges out another one in terms of, main character, I would suppose. But no, they're basically they're on screen at the same time of each other, except in the very beginning when they're separated. And they're given equal weight as equal protagonists. And the funny thing is you could take away one of the twins and you would still have a barbarian Conan type character that could still do all the things that a strongman character can do. I mean, we see them break nooses, lift bodies, arm wrestle and destroy the entire pub in the process. So it's, you know, I guess double the trouble, I suppose. But it's just interesting that they both operate like solo strongman characters, but there are two of them and they're compatible with each other and they don't like detract from each other, except for like a little bit of friendly rivalry or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's just interesting, not just for, you know, an action film, but I definitely for a sword and something genre.
Yeah, I think that if you had only had one of them and kept the same kind of dynamic personality dynamic, I think that this movie, yeah, then it would have not done as well. But the
It would have
fact
been
that
more
you have,
generic.
yeah, but the fact that you have them both playing off of each other and there is that kind of innocence, they still really are like little boys because they haven't had a childhood, and so they haven't been nurtured and things like that. But it's not in a, they don't play that up. They're just playful. So
No, and also there's no real love interest in the film, which is kind of a classic, you know, sword and sandal type thing. Hercules is not going to, you know, fall for the maiden fair. He's got to wander off and do his next adventure. And, you know, actually that's the interesting thing about this is a lot of the sword and sandal films are, you know, the stranger comes to town, does what he needs to do, stranger leaves town. Same thing with the sword and, you know, sorcery films as well. They're, you know, very mercenary. I mean, Conan, for all purposes, is a mercenary in his film. And then after that film, he's going to go do his adventures and become King Conan. We watched Sword and the Sorcerer recently, which also has Richard Lynch as a bad guy. But that character's a flat out mercenary. And, you know, that movie even ends with, let's go out, find more adventures. This is also different that when the movie ends, you know, the twins return to their caravan of singers, magicians, entertainers. And I think the strong implication is yeah, there were barbarians in this movie. They're beefy, they're strong, they can fight a lot of stuff, but I don't see, you know, a life for them of being the warrior mercenaries. They're probably going to continue with the caravan and, you know, be a strong man for a circus type act or something like that. So it's also different that way. In the way it ends is it's a more peaceful future for these characters instead of a adventurous, rowdy, mercenary type of, you know, life.
yeah, and I think you know, the Barbarians actually plays with a lot of the tropes, and this is one of the ways that they do it, because I mean, for all intents and purposes, the way that it starts, it sounds like it's going to be like another Beastmaster or Conan the Barbarian, where you hear about, you know, our young hero, you know, goes through all of these.
Well, the village slash town slash caravan is ransacked. Everyone's dead. Their kids. So it starts out all of them start out that way.
It all hits the same beats, but instead of kind of following those same tropes, they really do take them in a very different direction. And I think that's where I think a lot of the critics of this film really miss the mark, because there is a number of situations that really do kind of play against those tropes and really try to do something a bit different.
I would say, you know, even though it's the buildup for it's the first 20 minutes of the movie and then it's resolved and they have to move on the other thing, but, you know, keeping them separate and having them basically Pavlov's dog conditioned to, you know, hate the person in the helmet, and they don't know each other alive and they got to fight each other in the arena later. I mean, that's different. That's really offbeat. I mean, we've seen other movies where a character they're forced to fight their friend that, you know, I can't kill you, you're my friend, you know. But, you know, the path to get there in the beginning of this movie it's an interesting setup. And I dig it because it is kind of inventive.
Yeah, definitely. You know, they think that you know, the helmet is kind of key to, you know, the evil guard, you know, and so they're each donning each other's guards helmets. So they are probably conditioned to think that that's the guard that they're fighting against, not knowing that it's actually their brother. And so, you know, it's done with humor when they end up whacking off the helmets. Which is, again, kind of playful, plays it a little bit lighter than going really, you know, into kind of heavy, deep, emotional baggage type of real estate area.
Although in a different type of movie, a darker movie. I mean, that would be your movie, is that first 20 minutes stretched to an hour and a half of psychological peplum torture of, two people conditioned to hate each other.
Yeah, because they really do set it up thinking that, oh, okay, the kids are going to be safe because, Kadar has promised that he won't hurt them, his men won't hurt them.
Scheming.
But he was, he's scheming along with his sorceress named China, who says, well, yeah, we'll just make them hurt each other. And so it sets down this path for years that is obviously condensed into like 20 minutes, but it's a pretty good payoff.
We just, like last month we talked about Son of Samson, and that had a scheming lady that kind of ruled things behind the throne. And this one did too, with the character of I forgot her name already. She looks like Laura Gimster, but it's not Laura Gimster. What was her name again? I said it.
Isn't it?
No, the evil lady.
Oh, China.
That's
Yeah,
right.
sorry.
Spelled actually with an I instead of a Y. She's actually a pretty formidable, cunning sorceress. I mean, we've seen our fair share of peplum ladies that are the, catty, they want to survive. They'll throw other people under the rug or whatever the idiom is to, become the queen and then eventually get spurned and stuff like that. But this month and last month, after watching Son of Samson with the, Egyptian queen in that one, although she wasn't queen of Egypt, she was a Persian, I think.
Yeah, she was.
She was evil. She was still evil.
Yes.
So the ladies in this film, I mean, for an Italian film, they didn't go all out on the nudity on this one. I actually thought an hour into the film we weren't actually going to see any nudity at all, but there was like 2 quick, brief breast flashes, but other than that, they played it pretty chaste. I mean, there is like a seductive dancing bar scene where the lady is dancing, everyone's clamoring for her. I do have to point this out because I didn't know that the ruby was a belly button ruby until like towards the end. I just thought it was a ruby, which
they make reference to the belly stone, but it isn't until late in the movie, and then it's kind of like, are they talking about the ruby? So I'm kind of making an assumption that reference to the belly button and the ruby are, referred to earlier in the film, but maybe that got edited out. I'm not sure.
It's so funny because usually we bring up women in terms of sword and sandal, sword and sorcery, especially the older ones. You couldn't show a sex scene, so you have the sexy dancing sequence, and this movie has the sexy dancing sequences, and like in the pub and whatnot. But like in Son of Samson last month, the queen is doing her belly dance, and Mark Forrest like ooh la la and all that stuff. So we see a lot of belly dancing in old school peplum, but they don't ever have a belly button stone. And then in this movie we have a belly button stone, but no one's actually belly dancing.
Yeah, the closest we get is the gal in the
pub,
in the bucket of blood pub.
Yeah. But there is a harem of women. They're all fairly scantily claddily dressed, but not just like not super over the top, just everything's kind of covered up everything. I think it's implied that when the Barbarian brothers break in to rescue Canary and they try to leave because the ladies have been neglected by Richard Lynch, and the dudes are, have an immaturity level of, 12-year-olds. I think it's implied that
they were pretty excited to be in a harem for the night. And
I think there's some off-screen wink nudges going on there.
What's interesting is the fact that I think all the women are a bit more, have stronger personalities in this film than I think some of the other ones. Like you have, China the sorceress. She's evil. She's a formidable villain. She's, in leagues with Kadar, but not really, because she has her own agenda. Then you have Canary, who is a queen in her own right, with the ruby has indicated that she is the queen. She has strong personality. She has a lot of ethics and morals. She is held by Kadar she maintains her promise. But you know, while he kind of gives in to her charms, she still is not given into his. And so she still kind of has that ethics about her. Ismay, who we find out is Kara from the Ragnuts from much earlier. She had disappeared. She becomes this thief. She claims that she's not a virgin. And you know, she doesn't like hit on the brothers at all. You know, she's more playful with them and stuff like that. So she really is her own person too. And you know, other
The
than
brothers make like kissy faces at her, but she really just buffs them.
yeah, she's just like, well, she knows who they are. They were her friends, and you know, they're kind of her village brothers. I'm gonna put that in quotes, but yeah, there isn't really a love interest as much as a brotherly interest between all of them. As far as we know, she doesn't have any sort of love interest. She's out there, she's making her way. And you know, she probably would have been off doing something, except for whatever reason she got caught by the Ragnuts, and she was, you know, in a cage. And the only time that she's kind of coy is when she asks the brothers to release her, and they're like, no, there's probably a reason why you're in there. But she's the one that comes up with the plan that the brothers, hey, jump in this hole, I'll distract the dragon, and then you guys stab them from underneath. You know, she's the brains of the group, and she holds her own.
What would you say that, because you made the comparison, we were talking about soundtrack, that this movie reminded you a lot of Lady Hawk?
Yeah.
That she's the Matthew Broderick type character, because he was like the thiefy mouse character in that.
Yeah, and he's the one that is the one that problem solves. Yeah, I would kind of think that. We'll get to the music in a minute, but I do think that, you know, she is an interesting character. And again, I think this kind of goes against those typical sword and sorcery type tropes.
Yeah, it's not like Deathstalker where she's, you know, killed quickly after being, you know, you know, sexy time with. I don't know where it's quite going with that. You know, she's not just the, you know, she's not really even eye candy. I mean, yeah, she's pretty and all, but you know, she's dressed, you know, her body's not a spectacle as other bodies are. I mean, seriously, it's really the twins. Their body is the spectacle, like a typical strongman type movie, but even more so because, you know, thinking of, you know, the sword and sorcery films of the 80s, the only other like bodybuilder that did, you know, this type of movie was Conan, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Conan films. You know, he was a legit bodybuilder. These two are legit bodybuilders, and you know, they did competitions, they have, you know, their physique, you know, their body is their art, so you know, you do have to show it off. So everyone else's body is clothed or, you know, more conservative, or
yeah, and more the everyday type person body that you would come across. The exception, I would say, is Jacko, and that's only because of his height. He's played by George Eastman, who had worked with
he's been in every time.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of them. I think he's passed on now, but
no, he's still alive.
Oh, is he still?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, is it
Rabid Dogs here?
Yeah, that was my movie that I saw him in that I really liked. But he's like a really tall fellow, and so you know, he has the height where I think over the twins, but you know, still the twins, you know, with these big arms.
I'm still like, why on earth are you challenging the obvious muscle-clad barbarian to an arm wrestling match? This isn't like over the top here. There's no way you're going to win against this guy, cheating or not cheating. He's just going to obliterate you. This should have been a no contest.
Yeah.
So,
but then he stood up and he's like really tall, and he's got the snake. I think the snake was part of his intimidation.
But it doesn't work because the barbarian snarls at the snake, and the snake takes off.
I know.
He's like, you scared my snake.
Yeah.
So other movies that this is like, we'll talk about Lady Hawk in a second, but I do want to bring up Ator, which was the, you know, the not long running, but you know, 4 movies is long running enough for an 80s Italian film. But Ator was an Italian equivalent of Conan and all those sword and sorcery films, and it had Miles O'Keefe on it. And there's a lot of crossover between the films in terms of, how they start, young kid, not really destined, but they're gonna eventually take down the evil warlord. Their village gets burned. They're gonna, swear vengeance or rescue someone. So, but in Ator, there's a sequence of I have to go get the magical items so I could deal with the giant spider at the end. And one of them is a mirror shield. They have to get the magic items in this to deal with the dragon. And Richard Lynch surprisingly has a mirror shield that probably borrowed from Ator.
And I hadn't thought about it until just now, but Clash of the Titans, his shield kind of reminds me a little bit of that and using it.
The anti-Medusa thing.
Exactly.
But I would say this movie is way, way better than Ator. Ator's not bad. It has some kind of weird, can I marry my sister type thing that this movie thankfully does not go into. I would also say maybe a little bit, maybe it's just because of happenstance that they're twins, that there's probably a little bit of the legend of Ramus and Remus in this as well.
Oh, yeah.
But Lady Hawk.
Yeah, so one of the things that I alluded to in the plot is the upbeat electronic music when you've got this kind of decimated battlefield. It really reminded me of kind of that juxtaposition of music in Lady Hawk, the fact that you'd have music that would kind of be upbeat, hopeful, and kind of playful at the same time, which I think alluded to the underlying tone of what this film would take.
But also, these are all medievally magic movies, but then you have an electronic, soundtrack for them, which seems very, counter to it.
Yeah, but I think that's part of what also helps this film is the fact that the music does stand out. And where I would say for Beastmaster, Conan the Barbarian, any of those other films, I can't really remember the music, but I can definitely remember the music for the Barbarians. And I think that that's, again, kind of going against the tropes of the music, kind of, taking a back seat to the film. This one, the director, kind of brought it more towards the forefront and did kind of play a bit more with the music as part of one of the characters in the film. And I think that works.
Are you saying if Conan had a Giorgio Moroder score, it would have had more memorable music?
Maybe. I don't really remember the music from the other ones. Maybe it's just because we saw the Barbarians last night. But, the fact is that, you'll watch a film and sometimes the music will just immediately be there and it's in your mind and you hear it throughout. And it's not in a grating way, but it does kind of lend to the tone and your experience with the film. And I think that it works with this film, the music that they have.
I can't remember the composer's name, but I did look him up briefly.
Mhm.
I mean, he worked on a lot of other Italian films, not as prolific as Ennio Morricone. But like he did the Hercules film with Lou Ferrigno, but he did a lot of Brian De Palma scores of the 80s, like Dress to Kill and Body Heat, Double something, one of those. So he did a lot of like neo-noir stuff as well.
I could actually see that, but definitely reminded me of the music Tangerine Dream from Lady Hawk. And that film was from 1985. And as we were talking offline, this film comes right at the kind of the end of the cycle of sword and sorcery that kind of started with, Beastmaster and Conan the Barbarian at the beginning of the decade. And this film's from 87. Obviously, Deodato, brought in people that he had worked with in some of his other films. So yeah, like we didn't talk about Michael Berryman, but he was in there as the Dirt Master. Nick and I had the pleasure of meeting him at one of the collector shows that we went to. Very nice man. He is kind of a scary dude and in a lot of scary films, but He's really a gentleman outside of all these films.
His standout scene is, he's the dirt master. He's in charge of the pit. He's overseeing the Pavlov's dog conditioning of the two twins. And, these are years going by. I mean, this is the equivalent of Conan, where he's put to like the death birder turn. He's just forced to turn that for like 10 years or so.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's going on in the pit, right? So it's all this conditioning, all this psychological torture. The brothers got to fight each other. This is his moment. Yes, years have culminated to this point. I have reverse trained these kids so well. They're going to kill each other. And of course, they take off their helmets, beat everyone else up and flee. And he just falls to his knees, like wailing, like you put all that effort into something like a giant, house of cards or something, and it just falls. And you're like, no, and that's his scene. Is that, he appears later. He goes with the sorceress to the dragon, but we never see his body. He could still be alive.
There may be a sequel out there somewhere with Michael Berryman sometime.
They made a sequel to Sword and the Sorcerer many years later. It wasn't very good, but they made one.
So maybe there'll be
Tales of an Ancient Empire.
Yeah. At the end of Sword and the Sorcerer, they tell you to look for that film, and many years pass, and then it happens, and one of the characters is even in it somewhere briefly. It's the only connection.
I haven't watched that one yet. Well, that's an Albert Pugh movie, and I think one of the reasons we haven't watched it yet is because he did not bring in an Olivia Gruner.
No, I think there was in the first one, but other acting, of course, we brought up Richard Lynch. We also met him at a
collector show.
No,
they both worked with Deodato and Cut and Run.
Yes. So and then there was definitely some sets. So the $4 million is definitely put to good use, I think, in the film. Between music, they had some really good sets. His Richard Lynch's, in the Sword and Sorcery films, you always have this rather magnificent throne that the evil person is on. So Richard Lynch has an unusual one where there's these slaves all around it. It's a square shape, and he can get on it, and then the slaves lift it up. So it's almost kind of like a floating throne. It's very fascinating, but it's a clever and interesting. You're not going to forget that too soon.
Well, I think that's what, just like Beastmaster. That's why I think Beastmaster is one of the better sword and sorcery films out there, is because since it is lower budget, they took a lot of chances to do stuff that was offbeat but memorable, such as like the garbage bag bat creatures that grab you and they go blah, 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 and they digest you and stuff like that. That movie had a lot of offbeat stuff with it, and I think that's Barbarians as well. There is some offbeat things in here instead of it does stick plot wise and structure wise to a formula, but it's all this old background stuff that makes it more memorable, like the floating throne. For all purposes, he could have just had a nice gold throne in the middle of his cave fortress and we wouldn't have thought twice of it, but now it's a floating throne.
It's a floating throne. It looks cool. There's also a Star Wars connection, believe it or not, to the Barbarians. Would you like to talk about that? The priest.
Oh yeah, he's not a priest. He's a
magician.
He has a crystal ball. And that's the other thing. I think starting the story out with all these carnival and festive folks, and they're all using their abilities, it's kind of a, instead of just, here's my Viking town or barbarian town and everyone's kind of the same, we're rustic people striving by, here's this festive
very
group.
Nondescript, but for this group, the way that they're introduced, they're definitely memorable.
Yeah, it just those touches make it stick out. And so, like, one of the leaders of this, he has like a crystal ball. He has like this crazy hairstyle that comes out, like, I'm going to say Minotaur horns pointed down. And we're like, that looks like Queen Amidala from Star Wars.
There we go. So there's our Star Wars connection.
So I think the last thing I want to bring up, because we're close to the end of time, is I do want to talk about the dragon. I thought it looked pretty cheesily cool. It had like these big eyebrows or, the furrow things, but it looked kind of cute, like in a Jim Henson Muppet sort of way.
I definitely got the sense that there was a dark crystal influence on the puppet portion of the film.
And like the dragon, I mean, again, this is a low budget. They're doing what they can, but you never like see its wings or anything.
Yeah.
So it looks very worm-like. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take that as, it's not, I mean, it's probably not supposed to look worm-like, but I think lean into it. You have like a wormy looking dragon.
Almost
That's a neat
serpent,
take. Yeah.
a serpent with probably wings that you don't see. Yeah.
And then when the dragon, he looks goofy, but it works for me. It's the same, labyrinth, dark crystal type puppetry.
Mhm.
And then when the barbarian twins stab its belly and they actually climb up inside the belly, you can actually see the roof is like the dragon's like spinal cord and ribs coming down and everything. It's
And
so
hanging
cartoony.
down and stuff. They made an effort and they were doing different colors flashing in it. So it was, it wasn't, I think they did the best they could. And I think using different colors to kind of flash in there allowed it to do something a little different. So it didn't look so cheesy.
Well, Italians, they would do that, back since the Giallo films. So like,
Oh yeah.
we could go black and white, or we could just throw every color of the rainbow and still make a dark, sinister horror film. And they love doing that. So yeah, I think they did that inside the belly of the dragon.
Yeah, so I think they were leaning into, a decade's worth of cinematography and methods of working with a small budget and creating a rather good knockoff sword and sorcery film in the process.
From Italian neorealism to the Barbarians.
There we go.
Wow, that is amazing. I cannot wait till you discover and talk about Circle of Iron, Invincible Barbarian, the Circle of Iron. There's like a whole bunch of them. Time Barbarian. There's all sorts of like more obscure barbarian movies. I know that a lot of them came out on DVD at one point or another. I don't know if they've come out on Blu-ray, but thank you. That was an awesome presentation. And
recommended. Go watch Barbarians, folks. It's not, again, it's on everyone's like worst films list. No, this way better than that. It's a great film. Fun film.
Yeah,
A great
definitely
fun film.
fun. Yeah.
now I want to dig mine out and watch it again.
Do it.
Anything you'd like to close with? Anything we should be aware of that's coming out in the near future? Creativity?
We opened the show earlier that Michele appeared on Galactic Terrors to give a reading. I'm actually appearing in November. I'll be reading actually from Michelle's horror and space book. So I'll be reading about movies like The Blob and Slither, and I like The Blob. The Blob's a great movie. Blob 88, all those meteorite horror films. That's the big thing on the horizon, other than, still doing other writing projects, working on turning some old presentations into journal articles. Final stages of my Emmanuel CFP, that's going to probably go out tomorrow or over the weekend. But in podcasts, lots of podcasts. We still do our HP Lovecast. Earlier this month, we watched Mimic 2. The sequel to Guillermo del Toro's Mimic 1. We watched that a year ago, so we figured, hey, a year later, it's watch 2, and a year from now, we'll watch part 3.
Yes, because there were 3 of them. So we know what we'll be doing next year too. So I would just say, if people want to check out what I've got going on, to check out my website, michellebrittany.com. And of course, if you want to check out any of the books that I'm involved in the past, I have an Amazon page, so check that.
And I'm at nickdiak.com. Links to all of our podcast appearances, books we're in, projects working on, Sword and Sandal and Sword and Sorcery news, and groovy times.
And thank you. I will rectify not having posted the last show. So this weekend, both shows will post.
Oh yeah, Son of Samson. Folks, go back and watch that one. That was a great movie too.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight. I know I went down memory lane. It was a very happy stroll. So thanks again, Nick, and thanks again, Michelle, and I look forward to our next conversation.